Hi there, my name's Kev McGackie. I'm the Head of Digital Solutions here at Sabio. I just want to take the next 30 minutes or so to talk to you about our intent capture and analysis process, which is our way of providing voice insights for our clients. And I think all organisations have anecdotal data or assumed reasons as to why their customers are calling them. And intent capture analysis is designed to really turn your IVR into an insights tool. So it's less about just the routing that comes with it today, but it's about using the IVR and asking your customers why they're calling to really get the true nature of their intent, to really understand why they want to contact you, in order that you can then make decisions on what to do next. And that's an important part of our way of working, and that is that data-led decision making should always be the way. So we should always use the data available to us, or the data that we need to capture, in order to make sure we're making the right decisions. How our intent capture analysis process works is when your customer calls you, a small number of those calls will be forwarded or transferred across to our intent capture process. We'll introduce an AI chatbot, which will ask the customer why they're calling. We'll capture that verbatim from them and then send the customer back into your IVR as though that interaction hadn't happened. So there's no change to your IVR at all. The customer will still go through that same flow journey that they would have. But what we're now doing is capturing the verbatim from those callers, and then we apply a lot of analytics to that, and we start to interpret and help the AI to understand those different call reasons, so that at the end of it, you get all the data around these call reasons. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. Our demand analytics. So this is kind of the intent capture process summed up. We can go live within the same day. The technology, the way that it's constructed and how we've built our process means as quickly as you can start transferring contacts to us, we can start to capture that intent and start to build the model. It generally is as quick as the same day go live, and we have done that with other clients in the past. As an organisation, so as Sabio, we have worked with a number of clients across many different verticals or sectors in the industries, and therefore we already have a baseline as to the different reasons that customers are going to contact you. Now, that said, we always start with a blank piece of paper when it comes to building your intent model, because how a customer speaks and interacts with your business will be different to how they speak to another organisation in the same sector as you. And some of that's driven down to terminology or the way in which you position your products to your customers. So we always start with that blank piece of paper, but we really understand already some of the reasons that customers are going to call for. And we wait until we start to see those utterances or those phrases coming through by callers, so we can then start to build a model around it. So we can absolutely accelerate building the model, but it's about making sure we base it on what your customers say. The intent capture analysis process is run over an 8-week period of time, and by the end of that 8 weeks, we aim to have 80% or greater accuracy in understanding the call reasons. So on day 1, we start with 0, the customer calls, they provide the reason for calling, and we don't have an understanding, so that the AI hasn't learned any of those call reasons. By the end of this 8 weeks, we intend for that to be greater than 80%, and generally is higher than that anyway, but we set a baseline of at least 80% accuracy by the end. And that gives you a strong foundation for the insights that we're going to provide, that mean that actually the accuracy and the validation of what's being said and what those outputs are telling you are largely correct, right? We aren't going to find big holes or something that's not quite understood. There's always a proportion of calls that we won't interpret or the AI will not be able to understand. And that's because sometimes you just get a bit of noise. There's sometimes some phrases and things that come through that we have never seen before. And that's why the 8 weeks is great to give you that very first level of insight. But then many clients keep this on as a permanent solution, because actually customers' needs and their reasons for calling are always evolving. And decisions that you take off the back of this process and this data, as you make changes to your organization or how things work, you need to be able to track the shifts that then makes to your customer behavior. And when actually they start to provide you with new call reasons, or to understand that actually you've resolved one of those pain points that they had in the past, this is what allows you to really continue that insight. And then the last piece I suppose on here is that whilst we're building this model and doing it for that 8 weeks, and as I said, part of this around you can use it longer term, is that you're building an intent model that can be used for the longer term. Now, the model that you build as part of this activity can be used post the activity as your automation solution, as the routing that then directs your customers to any automation or AI that you choose to apply. So today we're talking about intent capture analysis in the voice world. Now we can apply this same AI and across the different contact channels, whether that be messaging or live chat, for example. And really, in its simplest terms, the call will land with the AI. It is going to ask, why are you calling? Listen for the customer's reason, and then transfer the call back onto your contact center. As I said, back to the top of the IVR, so they continue their journey and go through the same routing they would as normal. And here we will start to build up that intent list. So we'll start to understand the utterances that customers give, so the verbatim as to why they say they're calling, and we start to build them into buckets of different reasons. And we'll show you some examples of what those look like in a second, but that list is ever growing. That's the list that starts to really allow you to understand not just the reason for calling, but what you could do with that customer. Knowing exactly their purpose for reaching out to your organization, you can make a choice what to do next. And we do this as a data capturing exercise up front because it allows us to make data-led decisions. So we're using the data to inform the strategy that you go on. However, that model is then, or can then be used longer term as your natural language routing engine. That you've already built it and it's just a case of then using it going forward. So how do we actually do our intent capture process? So what is the building of the model and how does that work? So we've talked about some offline analysis, and as I said at the start, we always start with a blank piece of paper because that's important. It's important that we don't just use any assumptions or preconceptions as to why people make contact. We always like to start with a blank piece of paper because it means we build a model to match your customers' call reasons, not based on your business reasons. Now, the offline analysis that we do will look at any historical data or any of that anecdotal information you may have, and then we'll use that to help us understand how we're going to shape your intent model, how we're going to name them, for example. So if you already have a kind of construct around your call reasons today, then we can look at how we build a model to fit into that structure and format, but based upon what customers tell us. Now, when your customers call in, we will review the utterances that they provide to the AI. So AI says, how can I help you? And we will listen to what the responses were. We then start to bucket those into the different intents. So we'll take people who say, I want to make a payment or make payment, pay some money, all those into a single intent, which tells us that it's about making a payment. And then that's when the list starts to grow. Now, we generally start off with some generic intents. So in the first week, we will have, on day one, go and create some generic ones around making a change or an online problem or make a payment, for example. The next step in that is then doing some deep dives into these generic intents. So they start to have quite a big pot or a big pool of customers who are matching to it. And what we now want to do is try and drill down to the lower level of detail. So how do we take that make payment intent and actually break it out into 2 or 3 or 4? Like, how can we identify any nuances in what it is the customer has said to try and work out, are they actually trying to do something slightly different to another customer? And then the last part of it is on engine training. So we are working with an AI here, and it's important that it's never left unsupervised. we always need to be tracking its performance and making sure it's categorizing calls correctly and it is doing the right thing. So our engine training process is about us reviewing what the AI has detected call reasons to be and how it categorized them into your intents, and then training it to say, well, this was right or that was wrong, and trying to optimize it to get the most out of its capabilities. And you can see here on the right hand side, we produce a weekly summary through the 8 weeks exercise, which show you how your intent capture process is performing, and if there's any key nuggets of information or any trends that we immediately start to identify, we'll absolutely share them and call them out as we go through the project. And you can see in the back slide there at week 1 that actually we found 40 intents in the first week. So that the model building process, as I said, on day 1 we start with a blank piece of paper, so very quickly we start to grow what that intent model looks like. And we're always trying to break down in the deep dive section, as I said. So the closest slide you can see there, breaking out into that settlement figure. Is it somebody looking for a figure, so looking for the number, what their settlement is, or looking for the statement, looking for you to send some correspondence? And being able to drill down to that level allows you in the future to make a decision as to if you wanted to automate settlement figures or settlement statements, you would know the volume of customers. Had we just been using anecdotal data, or had we only been able to tell that the customer wanted a settlement, you wouldn't know whether that was for the number to be played in the IVR or for the correspondence to be sent. So this is where getting down to that really granular level of detail is really, really important, and actually gives you so much more insight to help you make decisions as to what to do next. Our 8-week exercise has some kind of key boundaries as to when we try to do things, but what I would say is, whilst this is a guide, it is a fairly agile project as we go through it. And the reason I say it's agile is that once we get started up to the point we complete, when these activities take place, we'll slightly move around depending on the types of phrases that your customers are giving or the insights that we're managing to gain. We don't want to wait to the very end of the trial before we start looking at introducing reprompting or something. So if we can do that earlier in the process, we absolutely will. But these are the key steps or key phases that we go through. So we've talked about the starting with a blank piece of paper and at the very beginning, which is the kind of week 1, week 2 activities there. We then go through our core build of your model. So between weeks 2 up to week 7 is when we're really building out, deep diving into the intents and growing the model. And I would say that traditionally by about week 7, week 8, we generally have in the region of about 80 intents. Just on average, I would say that's probably where we land. So it shows you over that time that the model does grow and we refine it and refine it. And to be honest, the more calls and the more time we spend on this, the more granular that data can become. Towards the end of the trial, or once we have grown enough confidence in the AI engine, we can start to look at things such as reprompting or potentially some containment trials. So reprompting is when, and you'll see this today in a DTMF IVR, for example, where people just button bash to try and get through. The same type of activity does exist in a voice-based IVR, and the customer will ask to speak to an agent. They'll just say, I want customer services, or I want an agent. And within our intent capture process, when a customer says, I want to speak to an agent, the AI will ask them back, okay, and what do you want to discuss with the agent? So actually knowing the phrase that they've used, so whether that's I want to speak to an agent or I want customer services, we're able to respond back to that customer in a really meaningful way that will generate a call reason out of them. Because just telling you that 10% of people call and say I want an agent doesn't really give you anything to do. We can't make any routing decisions off the back of that. We can't look at any automation or how to self-serve that customer in the IVR. So it's important that we get to a meaningful level of data. And so it's great because the AI can understand what the customer has said and react to them in a way that is natural, but that draws the customer then to give that reason. And we find that when we, in that same scenario of speak to agent and saying what do you want to discuss with them, we actually find that there is only a few percent of customers who don't then provide us a reason. So they may say speak to an agent again as the second time around, and in which case we're not here to create any barriers at all. It's just a data gathering activity, and so we just let the call transfer over to the IVR as normal. But I think it's just showing that actually when we have a meaningful conversation with the customer, one which is intuitive to them, we can really get the data needed or the call reasons needed to help us and help you to understand where to go next. And the last thing that we'll produce, so we run an activity that we call Next Best Actions, which looks at all of the call reasons we've captured, so those intents that we've captured so far, and we work with you to understand what is the opportunity, what could you do next with those call reasons. Now that might be, as I said, providing the opening hours in the IVR, for example, or it might be redirecting them to the website to self-serve online, for example, but it's about understanding what to do. And in some of those occasions, the answer will be to go to an agent. They're just complicated journeys or ones that can currently only be serviced by an agent, and that's fine. It's just about understanding what to do with those calls. And to give you an example of what those intents look like, and as I said earlier, we structure these depending on how your organisation may already look at data or call reasons. And if you don't have a method, then we'll agree one with you as to how we're going to structure it. But you can see here that we're looking to try and get to a meaningful level. We're trying to get to the point where actually you may be able to do something with that caller. If we take an example on here around make a payment in the financial services, so we identified that the customer wants to make a payment, and actually we're able to pick out whether they want to pay the full balance or a part balance. And you may have different processes depending on what that is. So if it's clearing off and a settlement figure versus just making a partial payment towards their account, you might have different processes or different mechanisms to allow that to happen. But this is about trying to get to the most granular level of data as possible without creating a frustrating journey for the customer. And we've got plenty of experience in how we try and tread that fine line between the two. As part of the data output, there's lots of broader picture insights that will come as part of this. And as I said, we're only doing this over 8 weeks, and some of these trends are just what we have spotted within that 8 weeks. But you would take a longer duration to potentially then go and make changes off the back of it. But it's about highlighting actually how rich your IVR can become as an insights tool. Now in this example here, we're showing that we identified a payment query trend, so customers calling up to make a payment happens on a Monday morning in the first few hours of the day. Now that allows you to understand how best to structure your resources. And if we think of one of our clients who has effected a change in this space, they've used the data, the intent-based call reasons to restructure their employee onboarding process. And actually their onboarding takes into account that, the training that an agent goes through takes into account the intents that customers are calling about and the volume of them. They're trained on where those key intents are or where the spikes are in intents. And then the agents are able to go on the phone to embed that learning, but to also offset the spike in the demand that happens at that point in time that we know happens every week or once a month, for example. So you can really take this and actually reshape part of your operating model. Now, as I said, these aren't changes we would look to you would look to make off the back of 8 weeks of data, but it's about, as I say, showing you the value that can come from an IVR that's really providing insights rather than just a rooking mechanism that puts them through to an agent. Another of the broader insights, I think we all know how we want to try and automate journeys in our IVR, or if the customer's been online, that we want to try and contain them online and not have digital leakage. But in this scenario here, one of the things we found was that the customer themselves was, as a result of posting out letters or emails, was resulting in some of those contacts coming in. So, the way in which the correspondence was structured resulted in part of those calls. So in the evidence element here, the financial services organisation required a copy of a photographic ID, so a passport, and the letter asked for a copy of a passport. But what we then found that the call reason was customers calling to ask, does the passport need to be in date or can it be out of date? Is that acceptable? Now that's such a small letter change which then sets the customer's expectation or preempts that question that might come in, and then reduces that demand. It then reduces the need for the customer to call and ask that question. And so by having intent capture analysis in place, this is something that a call reason insight that just otherwise wouldn't have been surfaced. And that's just one of a many that we can find. And all of these insights I talk about are very different by organisation. We don't go in looking for a particular trend or a particular piece of insight. We're not setting ourselves out with those preconceptions or those assumptions. What we're trying to find, it's about what the data tells us. And every output that we've ever produced in this way has been very, very different for every client, because it's all about your organisation. It's all about why your customers call you. And like I say, it might be similar industries or in the same industry, but we find fairly significant differences in customer behaviour across them. Now we know that first call resolution is a extremely important measurement for all organisations, and this is something that we tend to always try and see, is there anything around repeats that we need to highlight to the client. And you can see here there's a few different organisations, or a few different formats of how that repeats analysis has been conducted. The closest graph here, you can see it's looking at the propensity to call by geographical region. And so if you're in a marketing space, does that help you to understand which regions are least likely to contact you and therefore reduce your cost to serve? So if you know that one particular region in the UK is highly unlikely to call you or to repeat call multiple times, does that target, or does that become a more target area that you should look at? And then in the back graph, the one that's really small, you can see here that what we're looking at is the first call that came in versus the second call. So when they repeated call, what was the second reason that they provided? And trying to identify, is there a correlation between the two call reasons? And in that scenario, we have found in the past that there is often a business process which drives that repeat call. And this is where us being able to show you the first reason and the second reason, and you having the expertise or the subject matter expert that can understand what processes exist between those two that might have caused that, allow you to revise or potentially adapt what that process is to see how do we prevent the need for generating that second call in the first place. And whilst we give these broader insights, and I say they are very much based upon unique for each organisation or each time we run this activity, that they are solely based on what insights and data comes from your business. This section here, we always produce at the very end of the pack, and as I said, we run that next best actions activity with you. And what we find here is there's normally a number of different actions that you may choose to take. So that might be self-serve, it might be building a journey within the IVR that provides the response to the customer. So an FAQ style, as in, when are you open till? Another one then may be to make a payment and building a payments application. You may choose to do some contact deflection, so sending the customer to the website where you know you have an optimized journey that has a really high success rate, and actually that is the best way for that customer to serve. And we all know when you call a contact centre and the first thing you hear is, we're really busy today, go online. is just a terrible experience, but also delivers a really poor result. It is a very ineffective message to use. But we have ways of making it effective in this IVR by using the virtual agent or the AI and understanding the call reason. So the customer saying, I need to update my email address, for example. When the AI is able to say to them, okay, to update your email address, I'll send you a text message with the link. You just need to change this online. The success rate of that style of deflection, where actually it's able to reiterate the exact call reason the customer gave, so to the customer's perspective, it's not just generic, it's not just pushing everyone there, it's very specific to my call reason. We find that has a greater success rate, a fairly good success rate at moving the customer and channel shifting them from voice to digital self-serve. And another one that we sometimes find is around the routing aspects of it. So yes, you can replace a DTMF IVR with voice-based routing, so it's natural language, and absolutely that is a longer term opportunity here. But one of the things we sometimes find in organisations is that you may have specialist teams or specialist agents that traditionally you haven't made an option for in your IVR, so they may not receive enough calls, or it may need qualified by another agent, so by the servicing team, before you would transfer that call into that specialist department. By using natural language and hearing the phrase from the customer themselves, you're able to bypass that need for that internal transfer. You're able to identify that only customers in that very particular scenario would know that call reason or would give that call reason, and therefore you can transfer them straight to the specialist agent, removing the need for double handling of the call. Now, to deliver this 8-week programme, we ask for 3 roles to be fulfilled by our clients. So the first is a product owner. So somebody on your side who is going to be the advocate for what we're trying to do in the IC&A space, the person who's empowered to make decisions to what we're going to say in the IVR. So if we talk about the reprompting piece, when we said I want to speak to an agent and we asked questions back, before we apply any of these messages, we will always share that wording with you to have it approved. So it's the person that can help say, yep, I'm happy we can say that. The person that can say, yep, this is the insights we should be looking at, or this is absolutely the right lines that we're going along here. Again, I've talked about a subject matter expert, so somebody who really understands how business processes go together. So we talked about the repeats piece, the first call versus the second, and understanding why a correlation might exist there. But again, it's just somebody who can help us to understand when building the intent model, yeah, these make sense. Like that I understand that we have this type of payment process and this other one. So we would need to split those two out. The person who really knows the detail of how the contact centre is handling call queries. And then the last is to be expected. So a project sponsor, somebody who can help us overcome any blockers within the organisation. And the second one there is to make sure that they're an advocate for the solution. So we will share our key nuggets of information as we find them, or those key bits of insights. And what's important to us is that when we share them, that they're shared internally. We find that an organisation who is sharing these nuggets with a broader audience than just the project have a greater success in the long run. We find that later on, the digital teams, for example, then want to understand the insights as well, because they realise, oh, you can see that they came from online, or that they're giving a problem they had online. Can we ask them whether it was this or this, so that we can help to work out where the site has went wrong? The audience for who wants to consume and understand this data starts to grow quite quickly when you share those insights. And this is the inform aspect of what we're trying to do in our Sabio's approach to how an organisation should progress through its optimisation. So an inform piece here is all about getting the data. As I said, we want to make data-led decisions because it's the right thing to do. It helps you understand where you're at today and where you could go to tomorrow. and where the data justifies any decision that you're taking. It makes sure you are doing the right thing, building the right strategy, and going after the right opportunities. We then go through the transform phase, where you would then go in and actually apply some of those next best actions and see how it works for you, and then into perform. So how do we make sure that you are optimized and getting the best out of your, in this scenario, out of your natural language routing. Now, there's a number of case studies where we have effectively applied these changes, and these all started out with an ICNA as the initial data gathering activity, which then has led to other programs or other streams of work, but they are about giving clients the data that helps them justify what it is they want to do. It helps clients to understand the insights so that they can make a conscious choice about what it is they want to go and do next. And in HomeServe's example, they were able to use the natural language elements of this to gather the call reasons and to work out actually where could they produce automation. What are the simple journeys that would be effective for customers? And there is actually a customer session with HomeServe where you can hear them talk about how they're using AI and automation to transform their customer journeys. I would highly recommend listening to the guys' stories. That, as I said, ICNA was a starting point in that journey, but where they have went to now, knowing what that insights is giving them, is a really great transformational journey. And so I would really highly recommend that you give the guys a listen. And the second part, on our ebook, Automation and AI, if you are embarking on any journey in this type, I would highly recommend that you read what we see as best practice in that space. There's some pitfalls that we have been through in the past, done this a number of years. We know where things have went wrong for clients in the past, and actually what you need to do and how you need to be set up to try and achieve success the first time around. Hopefully this has been a fairly insightful session and explained what intent capture analysis is, why Sabio delivers it, and how our clients benefit from it. If you're interested in finding out more, please get in touch. There's our business cases, etc., or case studies, are on the website, so please feel free to give them a read. And like I say, reach out to us. Thanks again.